much, Lita, and I'm very happy to be here. Thank you, Michael, for the invitation, and thank you for the hospitality of everybody. We had a very lively discussion yesterday in the Center for Evolutionary Anthropology, 3-hour-long discussion of issues of phylogeny. And what I'm going to talk about today is ontogeny, that is the development of the individual human being, but I do that from a developmental perspective, from a evolutionary perspective. So, as Lita mentioned, I've been interested for the last couple of decades in what it is that makes humans different from other apes. Yes, we're less hairy. Yes, we walk on 2 legs. But I mean the psychology. What is it about the psychology that's different? We are in a room with computers and air conditioning, and we speak language. We're an institution, a university. We have complex symbol systems like language. And the other apes are more or less still in the same jungle they were in a couple of million years ago. Humans get to live such a different life, given how similar we are. We only branched off from the other apes about 6 million years ago, and we were basically bipedal apes for the first 4 million years of that, so only in the last 2 million years have we become so different. And the short answer to that, in my opinion, is something like culture. That is, we all those things I mentioned, complex simple systems, complex technologies, complex cultural institutions, they're not the inventions of individuals. They are collective products of people putting their heads together and collaborating, both in the moment, they're collaborating, but also over time in what I've called the ratchet effect, that we inherit the cultural products of our forebears, and we try to improve them and pass them on to our successors. And so you get a ratcheting up of cultural complexity over time. But as psychologists, at least me as a psychologist, I'm interested in the individual. What I was saying there is essentially the species, how the human species became so different and cultural groups became so distinctive. And the questions there are, what does the individual bring to the process that enables them to participate in this process of culture, cultural coordination, cultural transmission, cultural evolution? And that's one ontogenetic question. And the other one is, what does it do to you to grow up in a culture? How much of your human ontogeny is dependent on your growing up in a culture? If you grew up on a desert island, what would you look like at the end? Would you look like a normal human being? You wouldn't have language. You wouldn't invent a language by yourself. Nobody would have taught you anything. Your math skills would probably be on your fingers. So growing up in a culture creates a different end product than if you were to grow up as an individual on a desert island. So so the first thing we have to do then is to, if we're going to look at what is unique about humans and how it develops in ontogeny, the first thing we have to do, of course, is establish that uniqueness by comparing to our great ape relatives. What is it about humans that's different, and can we identify that difference and then see how it develops over time in individual children? That's my remit for today, is to give you kind of an overview of the work we've been doing recently. Lita mentioned the social learning, which I did a lot early in my career, and then we did some things on communication, but then in the last few years I've been focused on cooperation, and I'm going to focus a lot on cooperation today. So with that, let me begin with one caveat, and this is key to everything, which is that great apes as individuals, we have a lot of research that we've contributed to, but many other people have contributed as well, that they are much more like humans psychologically than anyone would have ever thought 30 or 40 years ago. And they, just to give a list, I'm not even giving citations because they're such general knowledge now with many studies. They perceive and remember very much like humans, lots of studies showing that. They understand the basics of the spatio-temporal world, including, at some level, causality, with using tools especially. Socially, they recognize individuals. They form and recognize relationships. They have cooperative relationships. They have dominance, competitive relationships. They read the goals, emotions, and perceptions of others. A lot of that research is actually ours. But I'm not going to talk about today all the amazing things they do. Today I'm going to talk about what they don't do. I'm going to talk about what they don't do relative to humans. So I will apologize to my great ape friends at the outset. And if I have to sum it up, what I'm going to say is that apes are doing all of this as individuals, and what they are not built for is human-like social coordination. So they're doing all this as individuals, figuring out how things work in the world, figuring out how their conspecifics work, figuring out how tools work, but they're not built for human-like social coordination in, for example, collaborating and producing goals as a collaborative group, in communicating, the way that we communicate. So I'm not just talking about social relationships, social interaction. Chimps do a lot of that. Social coordination, and the coordination, the sense of that will become clearer as I go along. Okay, first thing I want to do is give you a feeling for the phenomenon we're talking about here. So for many years, I've been talking about the 9-month revolution. What happens with young children at about 9 months is where they first start doing something really different from what chimps are doing. Yes, babies are special. Yes, okay, I get it. But 9 months is where it really starts happening. So I'm going to show you some films that just compare. A couple of these are home movies. So this first one is a home movie, and this is my daughter's 9-month birthday. We decided on the 9-month birthday to do this, and you'll watch. I get kind of excited, sorry. I roll the ball to her. Now watch where she's looking. Watch the look. Okay, so she has a little misfire, then she rolls it back, and she looks to the face. She looks to my face. She gets it back. She rolls it back, looks to the face, rolls it back, and now, all right, and it comes back to her by accident. She looks to the face. Okay? So we are doing this together. Okay? She's rolling to me, I'm rolling it to her, but she's monitoring me the whole time because the fun of it is doing it together and seeing the reaction of the other. This happens very fast. This is the classic showing behavior. So this is early communication. The earliest communication is pointing, but also this showing is quite telling. Again, it happens very quickly. Now watch. That's it. Okay? You've got a 12-month-old or so, and they do this kind of thing all the time. They just point, for no reason. Okay? So any of you who have the view that humans only operate on selfish motives, what's the motive for that? Okay? The motive for that is, isn't this cool? That's it. Okay? And I want you to say, yeah, it's cool. I want you to agree with me. I want you to align with me. I want you to ratify. Okay, and here's a third one, the classic Western middle class book reading context. Again, this is a home movie. There is a sibling working the camera and a sibling right in front. But again, watch her eyes with mom. She's reading with mom. Mom's pointing to the pictures. But watch her engagement with mom. She's going to turn around, take a look to the face about all this. Okay. And then they get excited because she said, kind of like a word, kind of. And then she looks up to the sibling and then looks to the sibling behind the camera. Okay? So the looking is an operationalization. It's a sign of the engagement. So now I want you to compare this. So I cut this from some of our tapes. We had a human-raised ape in Leipzig, a human-raised chimpanzee. This is Annette. She's about 3. And her mother didn't take care of her, so she's being raised by humans. And this is the caretaker at the zoo. And you'll see I spliced it. These are 3 little snippets. But I tried to find things that were similar to the rolling the ball back and forth and the reading the book and the holding up something. And again, watch her visual monitoring, or lack thereof is actually the key. So she's going to play with these. She's got the ball. Now watch, the caretaker is going to take the ball and try to engage her in a game. She wants her to hand her the ball. She doesn't do it. She bounces it. Okay? Now let's play with it. And Annette likes the ball and is playing with it. Puts it in the bucket. Very interesting. It's on her head. All right, that was a cut. Now we've got another set here. Now we're going to do the book. She points just like mom points, but again, no visual monitoring. Annette is enjoying looking at the book. She's got the pictures there. She's going to now play with some of the other toys here on her own. But no holding up and showing, no sharing, no pointing, no anything like that. And never got, that was one more cut. Now she engages with the book again, and we want to see by herself. Does she want to try to get mom engaged with the book or anything like that? And the answer is going to be no. So it's just not the same engagement, right? There's just not this, oh, we're doing this together. We're sort of in here, each doing our thing, almost in parallel. And in case you think this is something a little bit weird about a human-raised chimp interacting with a human, I'll just show you, this will be very quick, but this is a food sharing situation that we filmed before for other reasons. But now, again, you can watch the visual monitoring. There's no sound here. The kid is trying to get part of the apple, and mom is allowing the kid to take it, but any visual monitoring? No, they're just, sort of take, allow. Okay. And I could show you a comparable thing with a 2-year-old child in a food sharing situation, but you've all seen it at home, so you don't need to see it. But there's offering, there's requesting, there's all kinds of interactions around the food, and that show a different form of engagement. All this monitoring of the eyes, just as a little bit of a sidelight here, we actually are built physically for this. That is to say, of the roughly 200 species of primates, 199 of them have eyes like this. So they have sclera, but you can't. But you can only see it when they look to the side. And humans, all humans in all cultures, have eyes with white sclera like this. And the hypothesis is that this is built for coordinating, social coordination in close range of the type that you saw with the mothers and babies there. We did a study just to see if there was an outcome, a mechanism in children today that would at least give some credence to this hypothesis. And what we did was a 2x2 design where the chimpanzees and other non-human primates will follow your gaze direction. So you close, it's 4 conditions, but the 2 key ones are, I close my eyes and look up, and chimps follow because they're following your head. I look only with my eyes and they don't follow. Kids do the opposite. Kids, you close your eyes and look up, they don't look up. You look up with your eyes only, they look up. Chimps are following the head, kids are following the eyes. So this is at least plausibly connected to all of this visual monitoring that goes on. I mean, you can't follow people's gaze direction from 100 meters away, right? So this is about close-in coordination, we think. That's just a hypothesis for it. But we at least have a function in modern humans that's relevant. Okay, so yesterday, John, in our seminar, John Tooby asked me, do you think these are general things like an increase in pro-social motivation, an increase in executive function, those kinds of things, or is it something more specific? And my answer is it's something more specific. It's a more general adaptation than you guys have tended to focus on, but I believe this is the specific thing. We have a cognitive representation. Children are developing a cognitive representation of the social interaction. Cognitive psychologists don't literally think like this. Oh, we're representing objects, we're representing relations, we're representing events, we're representing properties. We're representing a social interaction. That's very high level, but I think that's what we're doing. And it goes something like this. We have a joint goal. We are doing this together. We're playing the game together. We're pursuing this goal together. And importantly, this doesn't make us go into a Vulcan mind meld and become one person. We each have our own individual roles to play. So we have a joint goal. You have your role. I have my role. So this joint goal with these different roles raises the issue of coordination. If we're going to collaborate, you and I have to coordinate our roles. So this coordination, this is going to be the natural home, in my opinion, of the human forms of communication, cooperative communication, as described, for example, in relevance theory, where we point and the other person is asking, how is that relevant for me? So cooperation, a notion of equality, that we're both contributing to this, and fairness, that since we both are responsible for producing this, that whoever is in this role has to do this to be successful, whoever's in this role has to do this to be successful. This is the natural home for a lot of the way that humans engage with one another in a kind of socio-moral sense. But at the same time, we have a kind of a cognitive dimension of things. We have a joint goal, but we have joint attention. on things relevant to the joint goal. And when we have joint attention to something, you have your perspective and I have my perspective. And this is critical. This is a key part of our proposal about what makes human cognition unique, is that the notion of perspective depends on something in common on which we have a different perspective. If you're looking out that window of the building and I'm looking out that window, we just see different things. But if I hold this up, we both see this, and you see it from this perspective and I see it from this perspective. And if I want to communicate, I have to take your perspective into account. I can't say, this is a nice button here, isn't it? You can't see the button. I have to take that into account. If I'm going to use a pronoun like it, I have to take into account whether you know what I'm talking about. Are we jointly focused on it? Right? So the social coordination that goes on in human communication and other forms of collaboration requires joint attention to a shared focus of attention. In languages, it's going to scale up to a shared topic of conversation. And so this joint attention requires coordinating perspectives, and this is going to lead us to perspectival cognition. I know it's an ugly term, but it's a matter of course in human cognition that I can look at the same object and say, this is a dog, this is an animal, this is a pet, this is a pest, this is a present from my grandmother. What's the problem? No problem. We do that all the time. I would submit to you other animals don't do this. They don't simultaneously look at the same object as different, under a different description. The philosopher would call it a different aspect, but a different description. That allows us to just shift around all over the place, and especially in communication, it allows us to tailor our communication for our interlocutor, given that they have different knowledge than us and so forth. Okay, so what I'm going to do now is go through color-coded blue, the more socio-moral side of things, and color-coded green, the more cognitive side of things, in that order. So here we are, collaboration and fairness. Now, here's a little task that we did. This was a pilot subject, so we were just kind of playing around. This is Felix Warneken and his research. And this is just a collaborative game. This is not really toward a goal. This is just collaborating for the fun of it. This child is 18 months old. You can see how much fun she's having. Felix is being difficult on purpose. That's part of the experiment. Okay. All right. Okay. He wants to do it together. Okay. That's the point. It's no fun to do it by yourself. Now, that's one where you kind of have to do it together to make it work. But we have other things where we each can do something and it makes an effect, and either one of us can do it and it makes the effect. And so if you leave, I can still get the effect, but I don't want to do it by myself. I want to do it together. So they will come and join you back into the activity. So this is the human-raised ape. Let me just say that both the kid and this ape have seen this before, so they sort of know what to do with it. Okay, she's trying to get Annette to do this. Okay, all right. And Annette is just not interested. She's perfectly capable of doing it, but why would you do this? This is, I would say that of all the millions of species on planet Earth, all of them would think this is, what are you doing? What a stupid thing, except for that one. That's the one who thinks it's fun. Okay, that kind of engagement is fun for itself. We're not pursuing a goal. We're just engaging around this shared activity. So this is a key motivation. Now here's a little more goal-directed one, and these are slightly older children. These are 3-year-olds. And what the task is, what we're trying to do now is measure, kind of be able to have an operational criterion for having a shared goal. And one of them is that if we decide we're going to pursue a goal together, then we should both persist until we get to the end, right? We can't just stop in the middle. That wouldn't be normatively acceptable. And so this is a little task where they have a stick down here, and each of them has, they have marbles in there, and that's a reward. The kids, they love to do this. It's always trouble finding something that kids love as much as chimps love grapes. That's one of our challenges. But they love this. They get the marbles. You're going to see at the very end, they put them in this, we call it the pling machine. They get the marbles and they put it in, they go pling, and they just, that gets them excited, much more excited than a piece of food. And the trick is this: they're going to be pulling it up the stairs here, but we have closed this hole off, and this one's open. So we're collaborating together, but I get my reward before you get yours. What do I do? Okay, that's the question. So these are 3-year-olds, and they're having a little trouble. I have to say, I see early humans. When I see this, I see this is early humans struggling to collaborate here. She gets her reward. She hasn't really noticed yet what's happening over here, but she hasn't cashed in her reward. That's key. She hasn't left the scene to cash in her reward. So now she helps her up. Now she gets her reward, and you'll see they both do their... Okay. So we had several control conditions, but one control condition was just when we came in, this was already this was already down on this one here, so she could just get hers, and the other kid's asking for help, and she does help some, but she helps much more if it's in the middle of this collaborative activity where we've agreed to do it together. So I had a philosopher friend who saw this video and said, it's not like she's being nice. It's like we're doing this and it's not over yet. Somehow the definition of doing something together is seeing it through to the end. So that's what Margaret Gilbert calls a joint commitment. We're committed to do it till the end. I can't just say to you, hey, let's go do something, and then just stop in the middle without making an excuse or anything. That's just not acceptable. Okay, sorry. So the chimps, anybody who, so the chimps, they start going together. We had a version of it where they do their thing together. Boom, I get my reward. I'm out of here. Okay? Game over. We call it a social tool. They know they need the other one. We have studies showing that they know they need the other one to get this done. And they, so they do it through. But then when they get their reward, they're done because they're just using the other one as a social tool. And the kids are somehow more, we're doing it together and we need to keep doing it until we get to the end. So this is what happens when somebody doesn't do their part. I told you if we agreed to do something together and then I bug out, well, guess what we get? We get this kind of thing. So we rigged this, sorry. I should say, as always, we are tricky psychologists. We rig things. That's what we like to do. So we rigged this so that this little girl, who's our subject, thinks that this little girl knows how to do this too. They're just sort of implied, you guys are going to play this game together. But this little girl has been taught something different. So she's not doing what she's supposed to do from her point of view to get this reward. And again, they're going to get this. They're going to pull the marbles in together and put it in the pling machine, which is the elephant's nose. And the question is, what does she do when her partner doesn't behave as she's supposed to? She tells her what to do. But then, this is normative language. Any of you speak German? Man muss. Okay, one must. Man muss an Seil ziehen. One must pull on the rope. Okay, this language, the must and the has to language, is really important. And I mean, I think if you ask people, what makes humans different from others, language would be on the top of the list, but morality or something like that would be on the top of the list also. And one place this is coming from is that when we are committed to doing something together, it's not just that I don't like it that you didn't do the job. It's that you should have done this. You shouldn't have done this other thing. You should have done this. The should is not my personal opinion. It's a normative standard that stands above both of us. That is essentially a product of the joint commitment at the beginning. Let's go do this together. We imply we're each going to do it as we should to get to the end together. And if one of us doesn't do our job, the other one calls them on it. This is a cute little study that I thought up in Germany because Germans have some different, slightly different conventions about when you take leave from someone. So if you and I, for everybody, Germans and Americans like. If you're talking to somebody on the quad, just the two of you, and you're talking and whatever, and we're in the middle of a conversation, normally I just don't walk off, right? I say something. I say, got to go now, or, oh, my class starts in a minute. I say something to break off, to take leave, right? It turns out I thought I'm in the locker room at the workout place in Germany, and I've never even talked to this guy. He's on the other side of the locker room, and a couple of us over there, and he's leaving, and he says, "Tschüss," as he's leaving. He's telling us goodbye, and we've never even engaged with him. And I thought, well, and then I saw a couple of other instances where people leaving the doctor's office waiting room saying goodbye, and I thought in America they would never do that. So it made me think about the phenomenon of leave taking. Leave taking is we're engaged, we're a we are talking together, we are doing something together, and if I'm going to leave, I need to make an excuse. I at least need to notify you or tell you. So this is a 3-year-old. And what we do is they don't make spontaneous joint commitments really easily. So we orchestrate one. The adult says, let's play this stamping game together, okay? And the child says, okay. So they agree to the joint commitment. And then we're going to lure her away with a more fun game. Again, psychologists are perverse. Just watch the bottom two. Watch the bottom two. Okay, we're playing this together. She's a 3-year-old. We weren't studying politeness. The 3-year-olds have a ways to go in figuring out how to formulate this in a polite way. But the 3-year-old children, and not all of them were this verbal and articulate about it, but all of them hesitated, and some of them would take their stamp thing and look up at the face and hand it to them before they left. And some of them would say verbal things. In a control condition, the child is just playing with the stamps on her own, and the experimenter comes up and starts playing in parallel with them, and the exact same things happen. They don't take leave. Just like if you were walking in the quad with somebody you don't even know, you just happen to be walking in the sidewalk, you wouldn't have to take leave because you're never joined up. But if you were going to class together or talking or walking together with somebody, you would have to take leave. So when do you have to take leave? When you the sort of short formulation is when you formed a we. We're doing it together, and I'm going to bug out. I got to make an excuse. I got to let you know. By the way, any of you have your children home? 2-year-olds just bolt. Okay, 2-year-olds don't make an excuse in either condition. They just bolt. So it's around 3 that they start realizing that I'm violating something and I have to do something about it. So I like little diagrams, and so this is similar to the triangular one I had before, but I like to think of this kind of thing as we over me self-regulation. That is, everybody knows a big topic in psychology these days is things like executive function self-regulation. I think this is a social form of that. That we have agreed to do it together, and if either one of us bugs out, the other one has the permission, has the authority to call him out on it. Okay? When I agree to do it, I don't think I'm going to bug out. So I'm saying, yeah, okay, this is like John Rawls in the original position. So I don't know, all right, but then if I bug out and you say, hey, what are you doing? Why didn't you do your part? Yes, I could say, get out of here, but then I'm not a cooperative person and I'm in trouble. I'm not going to be, nobody's going to ask me to cooperate anymore. What I have to say is, oh, you're right, I'm sorry, oh gosh, okay, all right, okay, yes, okay, I just had a momentary lapse there. I'm really a cooperative kind of guy. So I kind of think of this as we make a joint commitment to, I say role ideals, meaning playing our roles in the ideal way, playing our roles the right way, and we're each agents, and we need to get into that. We're responsible to one another, and we self-regulate. Now, we self-regulate it, and this is the key again for me saying, you call me out on it, and I don't blow you off. I say, oh, you're right, I'm sorry. That's because I think your criticism is legitimate. You have a good point. I was wrong. Right? That's something special. You're not going to have any chimps saying, oh, you're right, I was wrong. All right? All right? And why are you right? And I'm wrong because we agreed. We agreed that we play our roles in the right way, and then I didn't do it, so I deserve censure. So again, I think of this as that's coming from the we. Our joint commitment is self-regulating we. We have the right to protest the partner's failings, and we entitle the partner to protest our failings. And if I refuse to cooperate, I sort of give up my cooperative identity with you. You think of me no longer as a cooperator. Okay, now the other dimension of collaborative activities is sharing the spoils at the end. So if we're, the evolutionary context, which we talked about some yesterday, the evolutionary context that I envision as being the primary one, not the only one, but the primary one is foraging. Chimpanzees and other apes will forage sometimes in groups, but then they scramble for it themselves when they get there. They don't produce it collaboratively. There's one exception, the chimp group hunting, and I'd be happy to talk about it in the question and answer period if anybody wants to ask about it. They mainly travel in groups, but then they acquire the food by themselves and they consume it by themselves. The prototypical situation for chimps is they find a fig tree or a tree with fruit in a small group, and they scramble up and everybody goes to different branches and grabs their own food and tries to find and they separate out so that there won't be any squabbling. Okay, so here we have what we tried to come up with a collaborative task that had at least some natural relevance. And what it is they have to pull in this board together, and this rope is strung through some hoops so that if you pull by yourself, it just comes out. So you can't do it by yourself. You come by yourself, you pull the rope, it's gone. You have to wait for the partner, and then you can pull together. They learn a little bit about this at the beginning, but then this is from a BBC thing. And so it's kind of two experiments kind of mushed together. But what they did in this study, what we did in this study, this was Brian Hare was here before. This was Brian Hare's idea. They knew that they know so solidly that they need a partner. You'll see what they do. There's no partner, but the partner's behind a locked door.
He realizes he can't do it on his own.
Opens the door. I nearly dropped off my chair when I saw this. Okay. But here's the key. We solved the problem of dividing the spoils for them. We divided it between them. Now, being the perverse psychologists we are going to put the food in the middle. This one is the dominant one. She knows I'm dominant. She's reluctant to pull because she knows what's going to happen, and that's what's going to happen.
But the dominant chimpanzee grabs all the food.
One of the criticisms I get from great ape workers is, of course, they're not going to do. They are built for dominance. Any kind of contest over food, it's dominance, and that's many mammals and many animals, birds as well. They're built for dominance. This is not a natural task for them, precisely. Okay, because I'm interested in humans, and this comes naturally to humans, as you're going to see in just a second. But this does not come naturally to them. It doesn't matter whether they collaborate or didn't collaborate. The dominant gets the food. Full stop. That's the way evolution has crafted them to solve conflicts over food. The best fighter gets it. And that it's one of the ways that you stay out of fights. You just defer. The subordinate defers to the dominant, and then you don't have to have a fight. I mean, subordinate's got to go find some food somewhere else, but it saves a fight at least. Okay, now here are some 3-year-old children, and I chose this video because one of the little boys acts a little bit like the chimp at the beginning. They're only got it in the middle. So they only have it in the middle. I'm not going to show you the one where it's separated because that's trivial. It's the one in the middle. It's 4 gummy bears, okay? And they come in, and the 3-year-olds can deal with 4. They know 2 and 2. They sort of know. But you'll see this little boy acts like a chimp. He goes over, looks like he's going to take it. But he doesn't take all of them. This little boy comments, I don't have any over here, because they did do some trials where it was separate. There's none in mine. Now he comes over. He starts to take 3. No, says the other little boy. So now he only takes 2. And now they take 2. So he actually took 1, 2, 1. So with the chimps, what do you think happened after that trial that I just showed you? Subordinate stops. What's the point? Okay, I'm not going to keep pulling in when the other guy's going to take all the food. These guys can do this all day until they're bursting with gummy bears. They can do this all day because they know they can work out a mutually satisfactory arrangement. The mutually satisfactory arrangement is almost always 2 and 2, but the main point is they can work it out. The chimps work it out, but they work it out by one of them getting it all. So then it's not an evolutionarily stable strategy to collaborate to get food because they're evolved to solve disputes over food by dominance. So I'm just going to show you one more. These are 2 little 3-year-old girls, and they're one of the few that don't divide it 2 and 2 initially. And I think it's because they pull too hard and it goes out on the rug and they think all bets are off or something. But you'll see the kind of protest that I showed you before and that we've been talking about. The protest. And this little girl takes, I think, all 4. And she relents. She gives it back, okay? But both. So both means they each have 2. So again, this little girl doesn't come beat this one up or steal them or whatever. And she says, I don't think this little girl said exactly this, but many of them say, I only have 1. Or I don't have whatever. So she just informs the other one that I don't have as many as I should, and the should is 2 and 2, and that's what they know. And so this little girl knows. You saw her, she gives it up. She goes, she knows she shouldn't have all 4 of them. Come on, all right? So this little girl calls her on it, and they end up with a fair split. And again, they can do this all day. And I'll show you one more. This was my favorite paper on this line. The title of this paper was Children But Not Chimpanzees. No, sorry. Collaboration facilitates equal sharing in children but not chimpanzees. So this was, they're going to pull in, this time not for food but for marbles. And these marbles are here. There are 4 of them. And they're going to pull in together. And I'll show you what happens here. We have it rigged, of course. Whoops! 3 on one side and 1 on the other. What are we going to do? We equalize. Okay? Any of you, either who are developmentalists or have children at home, know that 3-year-olds don't have a reputation for being generous and being fair. Okay? And that's true. When they have something in their own little greedy possession, they don't want to give it up. All right? And when you do a dictator game where you give the kid 5 gummy bears and say, share some with your friend, they'll go 1. Okay? We found a situation that doesn't operate like that. If they generate the resource collaboratively, they feel like, oh, these are ours somehow, and this one is yours. They even sometimes use the possessive language. This one's yours, these are mine, because they should be split equally. We had 2 control conditions here. The most straightforward one was they came in the room, there were already 3 here and 1 there, and then they almost never share. These are the best data I ever got. So in the control condition, where there are 3 here and 1 there, they shared something like 11% of the time they shared 1. And in the condition that you saw, they shared equally. One of them gave up a resource. From the economics point of view, they show an aversion to advantageous inequity, and gave up one 88% of the time or something like that. It's incredible. The distributions didn't even overlap. All right? We do this with chimps. Okay, and now chimps are not generous. I think chimps are not generous, so we can't really expect one of them to hand one over. That's not going to be likely. So we rigged it so when they pulled, I got 2, you got 1, but there was another one in the middle. And I could protect it. I had the ability to protect it, but you had the ability to grab it. We had to pilot test to get it just so that you had the ability to grab it, but I could protect it. And the key was that across the 2 conditions, it didn't matter. It didn't matter whether they generated those collaboratively or if they just were sitting there when they walked in the room, they behaved exactly the same. So having collaborated did not make them more generous or having a sense of fairness. I will say also, some other people have done some follow-ups to this, and it's not just about being generous. So if you mix up the numbers something, you can see, is this guy just being more pro-social to this guy, or is he actually trying to equalize? And in this condition, you can't really tell because giving 1. But they never gave more than 1, for example. They aren't just being nice and saying, here, have all of them because I like you a lot. No, they're equalizing. And if you play around with the numbers, you can make it so you can tell whether they're equalizing or being generous. And the answer is they're equalizing. And they're equalizing because we produce the resource equally. We produce the resource equally. So this is plausibly has evolutionary roots in collaboration with partner choice. All the stuff I've been talking about, collaboration with partner choice. That is, we are evolved to collaborate with others, to play our role, to produce the resource jointly, to call the others out if they're not playing their role, to legitimate the calling out if I'm called out on it, and to share fairly. And anybody who didn't behave like that was left out. Okay, I choose another partner. Okay, you're not doing that. So to make this work evolutionarily, it can't just be collaboration. It has to be collaboration with partner choice. And so anybody who doesn't measure up to being a good collaborative partner doesn't get enough food and don't have enough food to give their kids, and they don't make it, or at least not as much. Okay, so a summary of this green color-coded, or blue color-coded, I guess it is, respect, fairness, normative self-regulation, and this is sort of culminates at around 3 years of age. Joint commitment to collaborative partner, protest, excuse-making, fairness and equality, sharing spoils fairly with a collaborative partner. Again, with, I call it respectful protest, because it's not like going over and whacking you. It's saying, hey, you know, a lot of times they say something very neutral, like, I've only got one. I'm not telling you what to do. I'm not saying give me one. I'm just saying I've only got one. That's basically saying, you know the right thing to do. Come on. All right? And they say, yeah, you're right, I do. Okay? So that's the normative. I'm just reminding you, and then that you know the right thing to do, and sure enough, you do. And this is all emerging really in a sort of a solid way for the first time at around age 3. It starts emerging at around age 3. Okay, now let's look at the more cognitive side of this same thing. So here we are doing another collaborative task, and this one, there's a toy hidden in here, and they have to pull from either ends. And again, Felix Varniken, first author here, is being difficult about this, and we'll see how the child reacts to the difficultness. I'm telling you what to do, okay? And no, pointing, I probably have studied children's pointing more than anybody on the planet, in case you're interested in this trivial behavior that is not at all trivial. I view it as the transition between grade 8 communication and language. It has many features of language that obviously doesn't have all of them. Again, the child is telling him, do your part, do your thing, okay? And we just need a point to do that. Okay. And now they pull it apart and they get the thing out. All right. So he knows the other guy's not playing his part. He number one, he's too young to chastise him, but number two, it's more important is get him to do the right thing, and he points to it there. Again, pointing is so interesting because he could be pointing at anything, right? He could say, look, you have a nice shoe over there, right? He could say, oh, look at the end of the thing, isn't that nice? No, in the context of the collaborative activity, it means do your part. Okay, so we did a little study that it has the following structure. This is the dependent measure here. This is the outcome. This is a stooge chimp, and the subject is going to come in here, and we want to know how quickly and how well does the subject learn how to play role B. I'm not going to, the particular collaborative activity doesn't matter. They're going to do something together. How well do you do that? And here's the manipulation. In one condition, this is called the baseline or control condition. They just come in and play it. So we know how long does it take them, how good are they at it. If they have no experience, they just do this. The other condition, the key condition, is the participant has had experience before in role A. So neither of them has had experience in role B, so they're both new to this role, but one of them was on the other side of it previously. And is there any value added? Do they know what you're supposed to do from having been on the other side? And you might guess the answer to that is that 3-year-olds are better at that. They've been channeling the other guy. They know what's going on over there. And the chimps, it makes no difference. It didn't give them any value added at all. If it's a social tool kind of interaction, you don't have to monitor what the other guy's doing in the same way. Just he does his part or he doesn't do it, but you don't have to do that. So the kids are really understanding what the other one's doing and learning what their other one is doing while they are collaborating. Now, when we get to communication, and I showed that first video to show you that I think I have a whole book claiming that the natural context of human cooperative communication, meaning I'm pointing to things for your benefit. Isn't that interesting? You dropped your wallet. Look at that. Wow. Okay, I don't mean give me that. I don't mean imperative pointing, but pointing just to share, which scales up in fully adult life into what we do, what normal people, not academics. Academics are weird. We talk about all kind of weird things, but what normal people do with their language most of the day, every day, which is gossip. You know, okay, did you hear that? I mean, we gossip plenty, I should say. Did you hear that? Did you hear who's dating who? Did you see that movie? Wasn't that a great ball game last night? What's the point of that? It's not accomplishing anything. We're just sharing experiences, and we're bonding by sharing experiences and so forth. And so I think that, and the natural home of this kind of communication is collaboration, where we're working on something together, and you dropped your spear, and I say, you dropped your spear. And in that case, it's because we're collaborating, and you need to see your spear so you can get it, and we can keep collaborating. So it starts in a mutualistic situation where we both benefit from you getting that information, and then at some point it becomes where I share it to you even outside of those kind of situations. This is a paradigm that we started working on in the 90s. And it just surprised us so much that it's so simple. It's just any of you who do, I don't know, fancy neuroscience or fancy cognitive modeling or something are going to wonder why people pay me to do this kind of thing. But here's the study. This is comprehension of pointing now. So she's going to hide. This is a 12-month-old pre-linguistic, and she's going to get him interested in this. All right. She's going to hide it in one of these two things. She's going to center him before she gives him a chance, calls him to look, and then she points. Any of you who have never thought about this are saying, so what? Okay, she told him where it was. She pointed to it. All right? Well, here's the so what.
The researcher points towards where the food is hidden. Half the time, the chimpanzee picks the wrong cup. It doesn't understand that the researcher is trying to help it.
Our communication is structured such that if I just point for something, you look over there and you say, why does he think it'll be good for me? Why will it be relevant for me or interesting for me to look over there? So that assumes that I'm being cooperative, that I have something that I want that I think you will be interested in. And that's what the child is assuming. The child is assuming that the person is trying to help me find this food. The chimp's not assuming that. And so I think this behavior, this is not one study. This is a whole series of studies. I was saying yesterday in the seminar, I had a period of a few years there where every new student that came into the lab said, oh, there's no way the chimps are not doing this, come on. And they kept trying new twists on the experimental paradigm to get the chimps to do it, and nobody ever got the chimps to do it. All right? Brian Hare was here before. Dogs do it. This is how we got the dog research started. Dogs do this because they're more cooperative, they're trusting humans, etc. Dogs don't do it with other dogs, they do it with humans. Another story. Brian knows it much better than I do. The chimps don't coordinate their attention. The philosopher of language, David Lewis, talked about pieces of language as coordination devices, that conventions as coordination devices. Pointing is a coordination device. I have my attention on something and I want you to coordinate with me on that thing. So this is one of the things that I mean about coordinating our mental states, coordinating our behavior and attention. So I think this behavior is actually multiply determined, and that the child understands the situation this way. We're playing this game together. Your role is to be the helper and be cooperative and to show me where it is. My role is to find it. Okay, and so when you point to it, this is a kind of a relevance theory interpretation, the Sperber and Wilson relevance theory. I understand that you are pointing for me, for my benefit, and that this is somehow, you believe this to be relevant for me. So this little 12-month-old you saw, there's not a, it's just she's pointing there. Okay, there must be there. The chimp, you point there, and they say, so here's the way I gloss the chimp. The chimp says, where's the food, where's the food, where's the food? Bucket, So what? Where's the food? Right? So the key here is that you're not pointing to food. If you pointed to food, maybe they would see it and they would eat it. You're pointing to a bucket. And to know that the communicative intention is the food's in there, and you're going to want to know that, you've got to make the inference. Oh, the bucket must be somehow relevant. Well, what's the most obvious thing? Well, the food's in the bucket. Okay, that's an inferential process that 12-month-olds go through every day. And the chimps just don't make that kind of inference. And I think in addition to the motivational side of it, right, where like the guy who did the talk over said, the chimp doesn't know he wants to help her find the food, but in addition, it has a recursive structure of that. This is only a scaled-down version, but of the Gricean kind of communicative structure where the child is saying, what does she intend for me to know? So this is one intentional state embedded in another, one mental state embedded in another, and I think the chimps don't do that. We have other studies that argue that suggest that they don't. So they're both not cooperatively motivated in the same way as children are with their communication, just informing others of things for their benefit, and they don't make these embedded inferences that why does she think that this will be relevant for me. So a key for this, to again repeat this same point in a different way, is that I believe that what's going on here is mental coordination that goes beyond simple mind reading. I'm putting quotes around mind reading. Those of you in the developmental chair, the term theory of mind is probably widely known, but human infants and chimps. We have a study with chimps where they will be surprised if somebody searches for an object where it's not, where they know it's not. It's a false belief task. So the child or the chimp is subject, and they see somebody. There's a stooge over here, and the stooge sees something hidden in one place, leaves the room, it's moved, and when the stooge comes back, the stooge should look where she thinks it is, not where it really is. Okay, that's the classic false belief task. And the chimps will do this in a looking time. They do predictive looking that he's going to look where he thinks it is, not where it really is. So that was the first evidence of that. But I think that's not the same thing. That is tracking other people's epistemic states, tracking other people's perceptual access, tracking their knowledge states. Coordinating goes beyond that. And this is a coordinating. This is a back and forth. So here's what I think starts happening as children get around 3 years of age or something, and maybe from 2 to 3, a lot of this is happening, is that in language you get this dual level structure of joint attention that I talked about before, but it's in discourse now. We're on a new level. So one way to characterize a conversation, and we have lots of specialists from our linguistic department here who know a lot more about conversation than I do, but we have a joint topic. We are talking about something together. We're staying on topic. Each of our turns should be relevant to the topic, but contribute something new. So this is very similar to this same structure. We have a joint topic, and each comment shows a different perspective on the topic, some new piece of information, some new way of looking at it, something that you don't know. I'm making a contribution. So when children are about 2 to 3, this joint attentional schema scales up to now on the linguistic level of coordinating our mental states by having a conversation. This leads us again to linguistic aspectuality, horse, animal, pony, pet, because I'm always thinking about how you think about this thing. Not just what it is, but how you think about it. There's a special, I'm going to get to false belief here as a coordinating attention, not just tracking mental states, but coordinating attention. There's a special version of this where one of the persons asserts something as a proposition. So somebody says the cat is on the mat, and he believes it's true. That's why he said it. He says, no, the cat's not on the mat. So now we have a clash of perspectives. We're trying to coordinate them, but how can you coordinate? You say the cat's on the mat. I say it's not. How do you coordinate that? Well, one of the ways you coordinate is by saying you're wrong. You think it's there, but it's not really. And so this is actually what I think goes on in the false belief task is not I track whether you saw it moved or not, but I'm trying to coordinate three things. I'm coordinating, she believes it's there, okay, because that's where she saw it disappear. She believes it's there. I believe it's here. Now you might say, I know it's here, but you never know for sure with all these tricky psychologists around. It might be a false bottom or something. So if you really understand beliefs, and as scientists we all do, that's one of our premises is there's no absolute truth. It's always we're getting the best beliefs we can, and we're going to revise them, and somebody's going to overturn them later or whatever. So anyway, she believes it's there. I believe it's there, but there's actually even a third element in the equation, and that's where it is, where it really is objectively. Because I think it's there, and she thinks it's there, but it really is somewhere. And children, by the time they get to be about 4 in this explicit false belief task, have to coordinate these three perspectives, mine, yours, and the objective perspective where it really is. Where it really is does not depend on where I think it is, where you think it is, where anybody thinks it is. It is where it is. That's a different kind of perspective. I've referred to it sometimes as a perspectiveless perspective, God's perspective. Okay, it's we humans have every human has a perspective in this, but we think about things objectively. And when we're doing science, we know that we have beliefs, and you have beliefs, and I have beliefs, and there's an objective way that it really is, and that's what we're all after. We're never going to get there, but that's what we're all after. Okay, so we need to coordinate three perspectives to show that indeed this linguistic discourse is crucial to children's development of this concept of false belief. We did a study, this is a number of years ago now, but we had a false belief pretest to see how much they understood this concept that the other person thinks it's there when it's really there, and if they really understood this. And control condition, they just played with deceptive objects, meaning they look like one thing, but they look like a rock, but it's really a sponge. It looks like a eraser, but it's really a piece of chocolate. In experimental condition, we did this kind of coordinating discourse about deceptive chocolate. What does it look like? No, it's not. What is it really? And we had this kind of discourse back and forth. You think it looks like this. I think it's this. What is it really? So we had this kind of perspective shifting discourse. And then we measured the false belief post-test. And what we found was that the kids who were in the control condition, there was no change in their false belief understanding. But by these children, this kind of discourse allowed a number of them to solve it when they hadn't before. So this kind of talk around a common topic, perspective shifting discourse, was key to the process. Okay, so the cognitive side of things is the mental coordination, perspectival, objective, recursive thinking. Sorry about that. I'm trying to get it all in one word, so I was in Germany too long. I put hyphens everywhere. Perspectival, objective, recursive. Okay, they have words this long. It's incredible. Okay, social coordination, joint attention, coordinating individual perspectives. I say bird's eye view. This is the objective bird's eye view. Cooperative communication, coordinating mental states recursively. On the conversational level, joint attention, mental context. The outcome, perspectival, objective representations, how it really is, independent of anybody's perspective of it. So I would say that other animals, so people have asked me this about chimps, so let me just say very briefly, because we're going way beyond chimps here when we're talking about discourse around topics and whatnot. I think it happens all the time that a chimp sees something from a distance and they think, oh, that's a snake. And then they go up to inspect it, and oh, it's only a stick. Right? They must have that kind of experience. Or, oh, there's some nice food. Oh, it's rotten, or whatever. Right? Yes, they do that. And that would be an experience where you would think they might come to understand false belief. I thought it was one thing, but now I see it's another. But I don't think that works. And there are some philosophical analyses that what you really need is triangulation on this thing. That at the same time, I think it's here, you think it's there. At the same time, I think it's a snake, you think it's a stick. And I've got to somehow resolve that. I don't have to resolve anything. I thought it was a snake, it's a stick. Okay, I keep going. It's sequential, I just keep going. All right? But here we are having a discourse. I've got to resolve it somehow. You think it's a snake, I think it's a stick. What's the answer? All right? So I think that it's this social engagement of this joint attention type, especially in language, that's really doing the trick. So let me wrap things up here by telling you that the title of my talk today was the same as the title of a new book. Sorry to plug the book, but that's what that's where I took the structure of the talk. I always get asked about where can I find these videos for my class. I now have a website that has almost all these videos. If you want to email me, I'll give you there's a username and a password, but it's also in the front of this book, because I want to say that most of the experiments I did it so that people who read the experiments in the book could get the videos, and a lot of people like using them for classes. And in this book, what I do is I have 8 different domains of uniquely human psychology. And uniquely human is established by comparative experiments between chimps and kids. And I want to start out and think of each of these as a developmental pathway. This pathway starts in early with 9-month revolution, maybe even before, where they're understanding what others perceive and whatnot. It ends up in false beliefs. This starts out with pointing. It ends up in language. This starts out in simple social learning. It ends up in teaching. This starts out in very simple collaboration and ends up in joint commitments that have a normative force. This starts out in simple helping and ends up in fairness of sharing things. So each one of them, it's a developmental trajectory across basically 0 to 6 or 7 years of age. And with each one of them, I start with what we know about great apes. So we have a great ape kind of baseline. If you want to think evolutionarily, this is the common ancestor to apes and humans. This is how we started out. And then, in the 6 million years since then, mainly in the last 2 million years was the hypothesis, some new things happened, and children began, and humans began doing these unique things. And you can see these things play out today in ontogeny. These are the mechanisms that evolutionary psychologists study all the time. Well, I mean, they study all the time, but this is the way it works in any kind of evolutionary psychology approach, is that these are adaptations, but then adaptations must manifest themselves in ontogeny, and some of them require a lot of learning and interaction, and some of them don't. We were talking again yesterday, a point that a lot of people don't get about the evolutionary perspective on psychology is that when you say something is an adaptation, it tells you nothing about its development or ontogeny. 0. So some birds can sing their species-typical song raised in isolation. They don't need a bit of experience, and we call that innate or hardwired or fixed or whatever. Other birds need to hear the singing of their species to learn how to sing. They are both adaptations. But one of them is an adaptation that doesn't require any learning. That's the hardwired one. And another one is an adaptation that requires learning. So we humans have lots of both of them. But I would just say a lot of this uniquely human stuff that I'm talking about requires social interaction. I would say that's empirically the case. If we really wanted to test it rigorously experimentally, we would have to get the IRB to approve a study in which we randomly assign children to parents, and some of them would be randomly assigned to a desert island and have no social interaction, and then we could figure it out. It's not that it's in principle impossible to answer the question, it's just practically not possible. But the hypothesis is that the child on the desert island as an adult would look a lot like apes. Maybe a little different, but he'd look a lot like apes because the adaptations were built to be expressed in ontogeny through interaction, and for them to be learned through interaction. As a kind of simple-minded thing, I say, fish are born expecting water. Their gills, their fins, everything is expecting water. They function in water. Humans are built to function in a culture. You put them on a desert island from birth, it's like an eye. It's like if you grow up in the dark, your eye is going to atrophy. Okay, if you have these skills for engaging other people in this joint attention, shared intentionality stuff, but there's nobody there. So that's just going to atrophy, and that's the hypothesis is, then as an adult you'd be like an ape. So we have both. So in each of these lines, we have 2 steps at around 9 months, joint intentionality, at around 3 years, collective intentionality. Actually, these last 2 are only collective intentionality, but nevertheless. And then the other point that I'm just to reiterate what I just was saying, I call it a transactive explanation. Transactive is a term that has been used in development for a couple of decades. That is, we have evolved capacities. So I'm going to be very careful about using the word capacity. Capacity is a word that means if this happens, it will become something real. Okay, all right. So we have evolved capacities. They evolved. If you want to call them evolved mechanisms, fine, but they're mechanisms that need to function before they really work in the full way. So they're evolved capacities for shared intentionality, and you require the social experience to make them a reality. I will say we end at 6 to 7 years old. I'm trying to say, what is it about 6 to 7 year olds? It just turns out 6 to 7 years old is a key age across all cultures. So 6 to 7 year age is the first, in British common law, it's the first age at which you can commit a crime. You're responsible for your actions. In the Catholic Church, it's where you can first take communion. In schools that have literacy, in cultures that have literacy, it's where they typically start formal schooling in literacy and mathematics. And Barbara Rogoff argues that in non-literate hunter-gatherer cultures, it's the age at which children can start doing things like tending the flock of goats and taking messages from one to the other. So my end point of my analysis in this book is children reasonable and responsible. It's relative. I have an 8-year-old at home. I wouldn't exactly call her all fully reasonable and responsible. But you can give them a reason why they should do something, and they can respond in a reasonable way. They give you a reason back, a counter reason, or they whatever. And you can make them responsible for getting something done, and maybe they don't do it all the time, but they know they're responsible for getting it done. And so they become more or less autonomous agents who feel responsible for their own actions. So finally, just to say, again, in my color-coded fashion, uniquely human sociality, cooperative, fair, respectful social relations, normatively self-regulated by the we. In cognition, perspectival, objective, recursive thinking, especially via cooperative and conventional communication. And both are ontogenetic outcomes of children engaging over years in cooperative interactions structured by humans' evolved capacities for joint intentionality and collective intentionality. Thank you very much.